Imagine a giant, heavy iron gate slamming shut. It is the kind of sound that echoes down a long hallway, signaling that something has ended forever. For a long time, the world has been watching a very famous family. It is a story that feels like a movie. There are princes and princesses, beautiful castles, and faraway lands. But this story does not have a happy ending where everyone hugs and smiles. Instead, it has turned into a mystery. Everyone has been asking the same questions. What is happening with Prince Harry and Meghan? What is going to happen to their two children, Archie and Lilibet? For years, it felt like the most famous palace in the world, Buckingham Palace, was asleep. They stayed quiet. They did not say a word while rumors flew around the world like wild birds. People whispered in grocery stores and argued on the internet. But the king and his helpers said nothing. But now the sleeping giant has woken up. The silence is broken, and the news is not about a family fighting at the dinner table. It is about something much more serious. It is about history. It is about who gets to be a part of the royal family and who does not. The palace is ready to speak, and their message is going to change everything for Harry, Meghan, and their children. The doors are closing, and they might never open again. Hold on tight to your seats, because what I am about to tell you is not just a silly rumor. This is not a secret whisper from a magazine you see at the checkout line in the grocery store. This news comes from the big castle itself. This is Buckingham Palace talking. For years, the people in charge of the monarchy looked the other way. They pretended not to hear the noise. But now, the very heart of the royal family is breaking its long silence. For such a long time, regular people all over the world wondered about Meghan and Harry's children, Archie and Lilibet. People had so many questions. They asked, are these children really royal heirs? Are they really a part of history? People noticed things that seemed strange. They asked, why is the palace so quiet about them? And why do we never see these children standing on the balcony like we see Prince William and Princess Kate's children? The rumors were swirling around like a tornado. The questions kept piling up higher and higher like a mountain. But through it all, the palace stayed completely silent. They did not say a single word. That is, until right now. Important people who work very close to the palace have confirmed the news. They say the papers are already written. These are not just little notes or friendly warnings. These are final orders. They are permanent rules that will change everything for Archie and Lilibet forever. The message from the king is tough, but it is very simple to understand. Their claim to being royal is gone. This is not just a fight between family members. It is not about who likes who or who is angry at who. This is much bigger than feelings. It is about the rules. It is about the protocol, which is a fancy word for the rule book that the monarchy has followed for hundreds of years. To really understand why the crown made this huge decision, we have to travel back in time. We need to go back more than 100 years to meet a king who carved these rules in stone. The year was 1917. It was a very scary time because Europe was fighting a big war. The monarchy was worried. They felt pressure to protect their family line. They wanted to make sure there was no confusion about who was royal and who was not. They wanted to protect the family from outsiders and from political danger. So King George V stepped forward. He was a serious man and he made a very important announcement. This announcement was called the Letters Patent. Now, these were not emotional words. They were not angry speeches filled with fire. They were dry, boring, and precise lines of law. But even though they sounded boring, those lines were powerful. They created the rules that would shape the royal family for more than a century. These special letters explained exactly who had the right to be called a prince or a princess. The king made the rules very strict. He did not want just anyone using those special titles. First, the child had to come from a legitimate royal bloodline. That means they had to be born into the family in the right way according to the law. Second, the child's birth had to be seen and written down by the crown itself. The palace had to officially agree that the baby was born. And third, the child had to be connected to the Church of England in a formal way. There were no shortcuts allowed. There were no exceptions for anyone. For many generations, which means from grandparents to parents to children, these rules protected the monarchy. They made sure that royal titles were not given out like candy at a birthday party. They kept the family line clear and safe. And here is where the big problem starts. When the crown looked at Archie and Lilibet, they saw two children who did not follow every single rule. It was not the children's fault, of course. They are just kids, but they did not tick every box on the list. There were problems with their births, their official records, and even their connection to the church. These were like little cracks in a window. You might ignore a small crack for a while, but eventually the window will break. The palace could not ignore these cracks anymore. That is why, from the moment they were born, a clock started ticking. The giant machine of the royal family was just waiting. It was waiting for the right day to make its move. That day really began in the year 2019. That was when baby Archie was born. At first, everything seemed to go according to the plan. There were happy announcements. Everyone smiled for the cameras. It looked like a healthy, happy royal baby had arrived. But then something strange happened. It was something hidden deep inside the paperwork. On Archie's birth certificate, his mother Meghan was listed by her real, legal name, Rachel Meghan Markle. That was normal. That was her name. But suddenly, without anyone explaining why the document was changed, her normal name was erased. It was scrubbed out. In its place, they wrote her royal title, Her Royal Highness, the Duchess of Sussex. Who does something like that? A birth certificate is not a fashion choice. It is not like picking out a dress. It is a legal record that is locked in history forever. Yet here was this official paper being rewritten as if it were a magazine article. Meghan said the palace forced her to change it. The helpers at the palace said they did not do it. Both sides pointed fingers at each other, and nobody backed down. In the middle of this argument, a dangerous question was born. Was this just about looking fancy, or was it about trying to fix Archie's legal place in the royal records? One thing became very clear to everyone watching. This child's entry into history was not smooth. It was not simple. It was messy. It was argued over. It was surrounded by doubt. And once doubt gets into the record books, the foundation of the house begins to shake. By the time Meghan and Harry had their second child in 2021, the palace had learned a lesson. They learned that sometimes saying nothing is louder than yelling. When their daughter, Lilibet Diana, was born, the announcement did not come from Buckingham Palace. There was no sound of royal trumpets blasting. There were no proud doctors standing on the steps. There were no official photos of the new baby wrapped up in a blanket for the history books. Instead, the news came from the other side of the ocean. It came in a shiny, happy press release from sunny California. For hundreds of years, a royal birth was more than just a family having a baby. It was an event for the history books. It was carefully written down, watched by witnesses, and recorded. A royal baby was never just a child. They were a symbol. They were living proof that the king or queen's family would continue. Every tiny detail was saved, from the hospital note to the signatures of the royal doctors. But with Lilibet there was nothing. No royal person was there. No official stamp was used. There was no hello from the palace. It was like the monarchy turned its back and looked the other way. For people who watched the royals closely, this felt very new and very strange. It was like a curtain quietly falling down on a stage. It was a signal. It meant that even though the baby was celebrated in California, the crown in England was not claiming her. If the birth made people raise their eyebrows in surprise, what happened next made alarm bells ring. Months later, Meghan proudly told the world that Lilibet had been baptized in California. She spoke very happily about the ceremony. She talked about the photos and the joy. But behind the thick walls of the palace, people began to whisper. While Meghan's team thought the baptism was official, the Church of England did not. In the world of kings and queens, this difference matters more than most regular people realize. A royal christening, which is a special church ceremony, is not just about sprinkling some holy water and taking nice pictures with the family. It is about connection. It ties the child to the church, to the crown, and to hundreds of years of tradition. It is like a seal on a letter. It formally writes the baby into the record books as part of Britain's royal history. But sources at the palace said that Lilibet's baptism was never officially written down with the Church of England. This meant that in the eyes of the royal rules, it was invalid. It was a ceremony that did not count. So instead of making her place in the family stronger, it made it weaker. Instead of gluing her to the monarchy, it broke the bond. The palace viewed the California ceremony not as a holy moment, but as breaking the rules. It was a ritual that, in royal law, meant nothing. This left Lilibet in a dangerous middle ground. She was celebrated by her mom and dad, but she was ignored by the royal institution. For Meghan, these cracks were not just about boring paperwork or church books. They hurt the very center of who she was trying to be. From the moment she stepped into the royal world, her image was built on one main thing. She wasn't just Meghan Markle anymore. She was Meghan, Duchess of Sussex. She was a royal mother, and her children weren't just regular kids, they were heirs. They were part of history. That royal identity was the engine that powered everything she did. It powered the Netflix shows. It powered the deals with Spotify. It powered the interviews for books. It powered the perfect pictures on Instagram. It even powered her new business, American Riviera Orchard. She wasn't just selling jars of jam and pictures of pretty gardens. She was selling a lifestyle that was touched by royalty. But that shiny image only works if her children carry the royal link. Without that link, the whole building falls down. If there are no royal heirs, there is no royal mother. There is just a Hollywood couple trying to hold on to a crown that does not want them anymore. Behind the soft photos and the perfect public image, Meghan faced a fear she could not hide. Without royal bloodlines to pass on to her kids, what made her different from every other famous person in California? For Meghan, the broken rules threatened her business brand. But for Harry, this was personal. This was about his blood. People who know the palace whisper about late nights. They say Harry would pick up the phone and call the family he had walked away from. His voice was not calm. It was not smooth. It was emotional. He was pleading with them. He begged them to think about it again. He begged for his children's future to be written into the royal records. Those who know Harry say he believed he could have it both ways. He thought he could be the son who walked away, but also be the father of children who stayed royal. He thought that quitting his job as a working royal wouldn't erase his family line. He thought his children would still carry the Windsor name forward, no matter how far away California was from London. But when he tried to explain, when he tried to make his case, the answer he got was ice cold. One helper at the palace allegedly gave him a very short answer. They said, "This is not about emotion. This is about order, lineage, and the future of the crown." For Harry, hearing this was like watching the floor disappear under his feet. He wasn't just a guy who didn't get along with his dad and brother anymore. He was a prince whose children were being erased from the very family that gave him his name. And then came the actual move. Archie and Lilibet would lose everything. They would have no titles of prince or princess. They would have no special ceremonial jobs. They would have no place in the line of succession, which is the list of people waiting to be king or queen. They would have no security guards paid for by the crown. They would have no recognition in the official history books of the monarchy. It sounds small, they are just words, they are just names, but in the world of royalty, titles are everything. They are the keys to the legacy. They are the keys to belonging in the story of the crown that has lasted for centuries. Without them, Archie and Lilibet's names lose their weight. They go from Prince Archie to just Archie. They go from Princess Lilibet to just Lilibet. And unlike a punishment where you get sent to your room for an hour, this was not temporary. This was permanent. The palace had filed the documents. The record books were being rewritten right now, and in those pages, Meghan and Harry's children were simply being erased. For years, Meghan and Harry had built their image as the royal rebels. They gave interviews. They signed big business deals. They told their story to the whole world. Every time there was a scandal or a new documentary, it seemed to feed that idea that they were rebels fighting the system. But here is the truth. You can only be a rebel if the crown still claims you. If you are part of the group, you can be a rebel. If you are not part of the group, you are just a stranger. The monarchy understood this perfectly. That is why the palace never shouted across the ocean. They never answered every angry news story with words. Instead, they stayed quiet. They were patient. They were watching. And when the time was exactly right, the palace acted like a surgeon. They acted carefully and quickly. They stripped the titles. They removed the rights to be next in line. They cut the final cord connecting the children to the family. So now Archie and Lilibet are not rebels. They are not even royal exiles living far away. They are simply outsiders. They are children who will grow up in California. They will be remembered as Harry and Meghan's kids, but they will be missing from the official royal history. That silence, the fact that their names are missing from the records, will be louder than any interview or Netflix show ever could be. And so we reach the end of the story. After years of whispers, guesses, TV shows, and interviews, everything has been met with royal silence. And now, with the stroke of a pen, it is over. The palace has chosen the rules over the people. They chose order over emotion. They chose the legacy of the past over love. For Meghan and Harry, the result is very sad and devastating. Their empire, their identity, and their brand were all built on the promise of being royal rebels. But once the crown erases you, you are no longer a rebel. You are simply gone. Archie and Lilibet will live as children of California. They will grow up with the love of their parents in their own world. But the official royal history, the records that last for hundreds of years, will not record them as heirs. That absence, that empty space where their names should be, is more brutal than any public embarrassment. It hurts more because it is permanent. It is final. This is not just about two children losing their fancy titles. This is about the monarchy sending a message that is louder than any speech. The crown does not bend the rules for famous people. It does not matter how loud you are. And in that silence, Buckingham Palace has delivered what might be the coldest move in its entire history.